All right, welcome back to the Language and Behavior Podcast. My name is Joshua Stamper. I'm with the wonderful and talented Charlie Peck. How are you doing, Charlie?
I'm doing great. And is it fair that you get to say that every time as an intro, that you're always building me up? So thank you. It's so nice to be here with you. It really is, with the wonderful Josh. It's true. What's going on?
It's easy to build you up, Charlie. That's why I love working with you, is because you are so talented and we get to do a lot of different things. So for those who are maybe tuning in the first time, thank you so much for jumping onto the podcast, or maybe you're watching on YouTube, and we appreciate that. The Language of Behavior is brand new. This is episode number 2. And what we like to do is grab questions from our listeners and from the folks that we are supporting in districts and at campuses, and sometimes even with some free webinars that Charlie and I do specifically on student behavior. And with that, Charlie, do you mind just, giving a little intro to yourself for those who maybe are new to the podcast?
Yeah, I come to you with an education point of view. I've been in education over 20 years, you guys. I used to teach high school for 18 years. I started on the elementary level, so I get it. But I saw so many problems with mental health. So I decided to become a clinical therapist. I work in crisis situations. I specialize in trauma. So I'm coming to you with some real life experience on both sides of it, which is why I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. And you have a fantastic website, and actually the book is right next to you too that you created. And yeah, you're just a wonderful resource for so many educators.
Well, I just think there's so much work to do. And I think that educators need more skills. They're asking for more skills so that they don't burn out and so that they can respond to that student behavior better that they're seeing. And there's just so much we can do to be better communicators and create that space for each other better. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yes. So I'm coming similar to Charlie. I've got a teaching background. I was an art teacher. I was a coach. I've done so many different administrative roles also, and was an assistant principal for almost a decade. So definitely had a lot of experience with student behavior specifically, and learned quite a bit during those 9 years, which I'd love to share out and support folks now. And Charlie, I feel like we're just all over the country, but even like the summit we just did, I mean, we had people from all over the world.
We really did. I mean, there were people from New Zealand, from Nigeria, from Ecuador, like India, all over, Canada, US, of course, everywhere around. Yep. It was really great. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're interested, you can either head over to thrivingeducator.org, sign up for Charlie's newsletter, or you can do the same over at my website at joshtamper.com. We're going to continue to have, beyond the podcast, resources for you. And then, of course, the book is coming out. If you're interested in, finding out more about the book, we'll also have a link in the show notes for you to jump on that pre-sale list, as we're super excited. We're really at the kind of the finishing line, if you will, for the book. And Charlie, before we jump into the question, do you want to just kind of highlight a little bit about the language of behavior, the book itself?
Yeah, it's so important as a resource to have some tangible tools, but we just wanted to make it easy for people to just implement a plan. So we came up with a 3-tenet framework. Really, we love frameworks, right? We need a process. And then within each framework, within each step, we have tools that you can actually use. So it's a tangible resource for anybody working with kids in any organization that actually can support people in behavior changes.
Yep. No, I love it. Well, Charlie, let's dive in to episode number 2. I have a question from a teacher that was just asking about proactive strategies. So specifically, like, how do we reduce conflict? And this could be really in any setting. It could be in the classroom. It could be in the lunchroom. It could be really anywhere for all educators. So where would you like to go with this for episode number 2?
Well, I think your tool is fantastic. So I think we need to start with the solution. Okay. One tool that we use, there's a lot we could say, but the one tool that I really love is the relationship inventory. So what you need to do is tell people where that came from and how you've used it. And then we'll dive in and I'll give my perspective on some of the stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think this is perfect segue from the book, because this is actually in the book. And this resource is much more expanded as far as a strategy in that resource. But I will try to do my best to just do a Cliff Note version. But the relationship inventory was something that I use as administrator. It was something that were kind of the best practices, if you will, based on data that a group of us really were diving into, and trying to have it as a checklist and just as a reminder. Because what happens, and we all know this in education, is that as the day goes on, it just gets crazier. I mean, think about even just your attendance. How often I got a email from my secretary saying, "Hey, you didn't take attendance, this period," and kicking myself because I just got right into the lesson, or was working with students on a variety of different things. And then, of course, just throughout the class, specifically the first 5 minutes of checking my email or getting some papers, ready for the class to start, or some other material. And so what this was, it was to make sure that we were doing the things that were going to build relationships with our students, that we knew were going to increase engagement with the class, but also reduce negative behaviors. So, for instance, just going to the door and greeting them with their name. Um, we talked about like fist bumps and high fives and side hugs, and just like making contact in a positive way. And these small little things that we don't even think about actually does help the relationship, but then also, like I said before, help students to feel like they're a part of a community, and it does increase their engagement as far as specifically the first part of the lesson, where you're trying to give the most important pieces as far as directions, or actually getting in the content itself. So we have a checklist, and we can show that out too, Charlie. But the checklist literally is just a reminder for folks, and for myself as an administrator, it was great to have that with me, to go in and just kind of assess and see, not as a gotcha moment, but just as a reminder to say like, hey, you did a fantastic job, but you might have missed X, Y, and Z. Something just to consider moving forward. And our teachers had it posted everywhere. They had it on their desk. They had it on the wall. They just had it so that they knew these were important things. And if it's important, it is something that we should do every period and every day, to make sure that we're creating an inclusive environment for everyone.
Yeah, and here's what I love is if you're like a school counselor, or you're an administrator, or even a school social worker, and you're working with teachers, an instructional coach, any kind of support, it's a great tool to use with your teachers. So I think everybody will agree teachers are rock stars already. They are
Oh my
doing
gosh, yes.
amazing things, right? They know, they look at this list, they're like, I'm already doing this, 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 and this.
Yeah.
So, and they absolutely are. So we're not discounting that. What we're saying is, let's just have a tool for discussion. Let's just have a tool to make sure we're continuously doing that, because
Yeah.
if we can check these boxes, we are definitely reducing behaviors in our classroom. I mean, the very first thing you said is greeting students at the door. It seems so minor, you guys, and I know a lot of you do it, but I was one who was doing that. And then I stopped doing it for a while. You know why?
Yep.
I got busy. I was trying to prep for my class. I'm like, they'll be fine. And then I noticed I was not making the strong connection. So it's just a reminder, just maybe get back on track, or to identify what might be going wrong. And something as simple as like getting your student's name right, get it
Yeah.
right, spell it right, pronounce it correctly. Those kind of reminders are things that are just, again, so simple, but sometimes we just get busy and we forget that might be a great tool to come back to. So some other things on here, here's what I love about this. So not only can you have a tool to just remind yourself, but those leaders can then come in and have something to measure, have something
Yeah.
to look at when they're supporting you. It's something you can use today, you guys. So if you're like stuck and you're like, I don't know how to get started with my teachers today, this is what you can start with. This is easy. Okay.
Sure.
So yeah. So like another thing that I like on here is about, do you actively listen? And active listening, I always say, is hard to do. And it is definitely something I'm taught how to actively listen when I'm doing motivational interviewing training and all of that. So it's important. But I always say, listen, active listening, like giving your full attention to your students, empathetically listening to them, doesn't have to be big. It can just be really simple. So the relationship inventory helps you just remember to keep it simple, but to continuously do it. What else on here, Josh, do you think is really impactful on the relationship building?
Oh my goodness. There's so much. I did want to touch on something you said though, real quick,
Oh
Charlie.
yeah, I know.
So you had talked about just the feedback as far as leaders, and I want to talk to our leaders. Or maybe you're an instructional coach, maybe you're an administrator, and you're going in and you're really just kind of viewing things. I always love trying to give positive feedback to my teachers, but also in a timely manner. I know, we keep talking about the business, and it's because it's such a challenge for so many folks. And for me specifically, I love just having this printed out and then just going and checking off all the things that I saw just in the first few minutes of class, both before the bell rung, and after the bell rang, just as a feedback piece, because like you said, our teachers are amazing. They do so much in such a little amount of time. And I can think of specifically a sixth grade science teacher that was phenomenal at this. And I would love just like going through and checking off 20 different things on the sheet and just leaving on her desk and walking out, because I wanted to say like, hey, you're doing such a phenomenal job. And these are the things that I witnessed you do. So with that, like, yeah, it was something that I loved having on hand. And that's really what it was created for, was to create not only as a reminder, but then also that feedback piece to let folks know, like, yeah, you're doing these things on a consistent basis, and you need to continue to do that because you're gonna see the results moving forward. And it's not gonna happen immediately, y'all. Like this is something that's time intensive, meaning like you need to do this repeatedly for a long duration of time. And then when you stop doing it, like Charlie said, that's when you start to see some of the breakdowns, not only in your relationship with the students, but then also just with the behavior that's occurring in the classroom.
Yeah, and the good news about that is it can come back to you. Like, you get to
Mhm.
have some control over that, and there's always a solution in front of you when you have this. So here's one of the things too I love about this. There are 20 things on this list, and some are very minor, very simple. And so I always say too, let's when we want to have motivation and we're going to do any kind of change, of course it has to be baby steps. So imagine each one of these you practice and just focus on each per week. Or if you want to do like a 2-year program per month, I mean, whatever you want to do, but you can even show this at the staff meeting and say, okay, we are working on this first one all week, you guys, or all month. Well, that would be more realistic. So, yeah, I mean, I love there's different ways we can do this. We can utilize it. If it's just, I mention the relationship inventory all the time, but here's like one other piece to it is I see one that is simple. So, do you give physical gestures of affirmation, like the hugs, the high fives? I know that there's a lot of programming around this, the handshake, right, to build that
Mhm.
rapport and connection. So, are we doing something like that? The next question or the next piece here is, are you proactive in offering that tangible option and choices to empower your students and
Yep.
helping them with decision making and problem solving? So, that's a little bigger. So, imagine how much work you could do around just that one thing.
Yeah, and we could do a whole podcast on that. Maybe that's something we need to touch on later too. Is just like, for our students that don't feel like they have control in their own life, to allow them that opportunity to feel like they have ownership in what's going on with their learning or what's going on in the classroom. It's like putting into a bank, right? It's improving the community and how they feel like they are engaging with that space. And so, like for myself, I remember as a student, like I didn't feel like I had power at home, and I was going through a lot emotionally. So when I went to a class where the teacher actually empowered me to make choices for myself and what we were doing in the class or for my own learning, I loved it. I was bought in. I would run through a wall for that teacher because it didn't happen very often. And so that's one of, like, I'm so glad that you brought this up, Charlie, because this is one of my favorite things on this relationship inventory. So there's a lot of power just in that one piece that teachers can easily implement in the classroom.
Mhm. They can. I mean, there's simple tools. I mean, don't forget, like the tools that you and I have already written about in our own books. I mean, there are simple things that we can use. So we could take one of these questions, like the decision making one. How do we make kids empowered to be better decision makers? So in the book that Dr. Cameron Caswell and I wrote, we have the path of possibilities, and it is such a powerful tool. I share all the time. I don't think when people don't use it often, they think it's not something that they would be able to use. But I just used it in a session this past week with a middle school student I'm working with in therapy who's really struggling. I mean, these are really tough situations. These kids are a lot of trauma, a lot of behavioral issues, a lot of fighting going on.
Yep.
And we simply laid out this path of possibilities and helped her come up with her own solution, like which path do you want to follow? And so there's ways to pull in other tools that you're already using that are helpful, but it does make you think and specifically hone in on one area at a time. That's what I
Yep.
love about this.
Yep. And I know if you're thinking 20 things, like that's a lot, just chunk it. Like take a couple at a time and just start implementing that. And as it becomes a habit for you, it's gonna be super easy to then just use it as a stepping stool to add more things. So
Yeah.
Charlie, I love this so much. I'm going to put the link in the show notes for folks to be able to access this. And for those who are listening and you maybe this spawning some questions in addition that you would like us to explore, there's going to be a form in the show notes. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you so much. You can see the form link there, and I'll have that in the description of YouTube also. But we would love for your input. So if you have something that's going on in your classroom, if it's going on your campus or in your district that you would like assistance, and you would love us to speak on that specifically on this podcast, fill out that form. It's just a question, just asking for your question for us to look at and to add to the bank of questions that we have from educators that we've been assisting and working with all over the country. And with that, Charlie, is there any last words as we're moving forward?
Just submit your questions, you guys. We'd love to hear from you. We want to answer them here with tangible strategies for you to use immediately.
Awesome. So Charlie, if they want to connect with you moving forward, if they have a question or want your support, how can they do that?
Just go to thrivingeducator.org and the form is there. My contact information is there. We'll connect that way.
Yeah. And then make sure that you're signed up for her newsletter. You can head over to joshstamper.com. There's a contact piece there too if you'd like to reach out. And Charlie and I are here for you in any way possible. So whatever is going on in your world, if you would like some assistance, please reach out. We love it. We love meeting new folks and assisting in any way we possibly can. And of course, if you have that question, we would love for you to fill out that form for us real quick. All right. With that, Charlie, thank you so much for joining for episode 2 on this new project of ours.
Yep. I'm excited, you all. I'm glad you're here. Thank you.